There you are. So, what's your next big idea?
That's right. Red with a space in the middle. It is red.
Ooh, I love it.
Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to the Open Yawn, the podcast where we shall attempt to bore you with our opinions. I'm Wyatt.
And I'm Emmett.
Okay, so just a couple of weeks ago, there was an announcement that rocked the world of a certain fan base. Netflix has announced that they have acquired the full rights to the Redwall series of best-selling children's novels.
Mm-hmm.
Starting off with a film adaptation of the first novel of Redwall. Patrick McHale, the creator of Over the Garden Wall, and was also the creative director and semi-script writer of the early seasons of Adventure Time, was hired to write the script.
Mm-hmm.
And now we get into why that is a big frickin' deal. Okay, so if you have not ever heard of the Redwall series, I pity your poor soul. Redwall? Outside of like the early run of Pixar, has to be one of the biggest influences on my childhood.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and because knowing that, like, you're not a big reader.
I am
and yet
not,
you've
no.
read
I've read
a
every
20-book
single book. Yeah.
series.
Yeah. And not just series, mind you. These books average out at around 400 pages a pop. Some going almost as long as 450 pages. Not a single book less than 300. That's a lot of pages.
Uh-huh.
That is a lot of books.
And I feel a little bad that I haven't read them all, but...
You have not.
No. Yeah, because even though I like to read and I'm interested in writing, I'm a very slow reader.
Okay, so remind me to circle around back to that after we get through the what's and whys and hows of Redwall. Because I'm very curious to see where you left off there. But, okay, so anyone who has ever heard of Redwall, this announcement had to have been just the biggest breath of fresh air. Fans have been basically demanding a series adaptation, like, because why not?
Yeah.
The series has so much to offer, and we will get into that. So, for anyone who has no idea what a Redwall is, it is a fantasy adventure series featuring animals of the anthropomorphic variety, bipedal, use their 2 little legs, starring woodland creatures. Think of it as I like to call it Wind in the Willows meets Braveheart. So hopefully that would pique most interests.
What's Wind in the Willows?
Windle in the Willows, like Mr. Toad.
Right. Okay.
Like,
yeah, I know
one of the earliest literary examples of
I knew I'd heard the name.
Animals. Yes.
But I couldn't instantly relate to
one of
what
the
it was.
classics. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I know I've read a couple of those books back in the day. So yeah, just imagine bipedal critters with swords and daggers and javelins and so many great weapons. See, yeah, we are going to get into all the deep lore of Redwall, just for a heads up, because much like last week's episode, I would like to devote this podcast to converting the unconverted. All right, so written by British author Brian Jacques, the first of 22 novels was released in 1986. 3 books were released in the 80s. Then Brian delivered a book every single year from 1991 to 2005. And again, these ain't dainty little children's books. These are full-fledged novels. And then releasing 4 more on and off again until, sadly, his death in 2011. Okay, so for me, to get the perfect recipe that is Redwall, you basically take the primitive, slightly medieval worlds of a Lord of the Rings or a Narnia, the shifting narratives and expansive world building and politics of like a much lighter Game of Thrones, the revisiting of familiar surroundings and archetypes of Harry Potter, along with a similar aesthetic to Hogwarts, because to fans, Redwall Abbey is just as iconic of a location as Hogwarts is to the Potterheads.
Pretty much.
Yeah, that, like, growing up with these, I can tell you all the ins and outs and every little nook and cranny of this place, because that's the thing. These novels are so descriptive.
Yes.
From the surroundings to the characters to the food.
Very descriptive with the food. Sometimes too descriptive with the food, but you can
to the
appreciate
point where you're reading it and you want some food. So putting that into a visual medium will be quite appetizing, I would imagine. Okay, so the main setting of the series is normally at Redwall Abbey.
Yeah.
Which is pretty much a safe haven for all the peaceful creatures in the middle of Mossflower Wood. The main protagonist animals include, usually mice are the main focus of many of the books. And again, I love how these books tend to freshen it up from time to time, that it's not like, okay, mice are always the main characters. The sole focus will always be on mice. No. Later on, they freshen it up. Sometimes, like, it starts out mice and then other animals get the spotlight.
The mice are more of like the everyman type characters, with other animals being more the warrior classes and things. So
exactly.
Depends on kind of what the situation is, whether it calls for a warrior main character or a more simple main character.
Yeah, I definitely see a comparison to the shower folk for mice.
Yeah.
Just usually they're kind of quaint, simple folk. Like
they have their happy little place, usually don't get into too much of the outside world and its problems.
The majority of the abbey is normally most populated by mice. They're seen as kind of civil servants devoted to helping other animals in need and giving them solace and sanctuary and all that. But other animals include squirrels, similar to mice in character, but normally like a little more prone to action, like you say.
Yeah.
Otters, the tougher sea dog types, like as otters be, are portrayed as like water folk.
Yeah.
Like you kind of think of sea towns and like not necessarily pirates. What's an anti-pirate? Like pirate like qualities, but
just like your tough, disciplined sailor types.
Sailor, thank you. Yeah, sailor types. I knew there was someone else who sailed the waters.
A sailor?
Sailors.
Sailors sailing the water.
And that most of the other species kind of seem to look up to during hardships because, they're the tougher, kind of kick butt animals.
Like, I always imagined most of the animals, like, along with the anthropomorphism, like, they're all more the same size.
Yeah,
instead of being
these are
actual...
Rango rules here.
Yeah, Rango rules.
Yeah.
But they're the more like the the tougher class, like otters and badgers, I've always like assumed that they would be bigger.
Oh, they'd have to be. That's the thing. You've got to
Because
nail
they're
the
always
sizes
treated
here.
as like, okay, if we have an otter or a badger, then they're like the titans kind of. That
Yeah, just imagine basically Lord of the Rings size chart here. Like mice are your hobbit size, and then maybe like squirrels are the dwarf size, and then otters are kind of the human, and then when you get to like badgers and wildcats, like that would be more like your hulks. Throw a hulk or cave troll-ish size, somewhere in between there. Like I always imagine them to be much bigger than every other animal. Without these are not real life mice to badger size.
Yeah.
But they have to tower over the rest of the animals accordingly.
Yeah. Like, I know the first book doesn't quite have all of the sizes and lore
Mapped
nailed
out,
down.
yeah.
But I feel like I remember, like, it describing a mouse and a badger. Like, a badger walking on its 4 legs brings its head closer to a mouse's level. So then if you imagine that badger standing up on its hind legs, that'd be like 2 or 3 times larger.
That the big thing about these books, the badgers are a force to be reckoned with.
Indeed.
Yeah, and we will get more into that too. Smaller than the mice even are the moles. I am so excited to see how they portray the moles. That's the thing about these books. Like, you don't have to change that much. Like,
no, you don't.
Like the first book, like you touched on, he hadn't quite gotten the world building yet, so there are major discrepancies between the first novel and the rest of the series, where he just had a light bulb moment and was like, oh wait, now I know exactly how the rest of the world needs to be mapped out. This is entirely a fantasy realm. This is not the equivalent of a real world forest, with those animal sizes. That I always imagined it as, replace humans with animals. And then I always thought like the woods aren't comparable sizes to like a real world wood is to
like
human,
everything would still be
sized
scaled up.
Yeah, but just like trees not being as big as they would be to a real life mouse. But
still like scaled up enough so that it's something different. It has a sense of wonder and like a big world.
You gotta portray this as a brand new.
It's a whole new
thing.
world.
Yeah, exactly. But moles are just such simple and agreeable fellows.
Yeah, and I have a much easier time imagining how they would be portrayed after BFG. Because how the BFG talks.
Oh, now you say that.
Is literally how the moles have to be portrayed. Just that. So just simple and using all their like.
That's a major
I can't remember
thing.
what now. How all the words that they would say, but yeah,
because that's why these books are so great, that he made up a brand new mole dialect that again is completely iconic to fans, that like can't be comparable to any other fantasy series out there. Like any mole that has ever been in a cartoon or a book, they are not Redwall moles.
Yeah,
I promise you.
That if you show me a bit of dialogue,
so precious,
I will be able to tell if it's mole.
Oh yeah, oi boy, okay. Like that's a mole. Like I always preparing for this, I kept thinking, are moles kind of like a deeper, happier Swedish Chef almost?
Kind
like,
of.
That kind of like made up language.
Ooh, the popcorn and pretty.
Yeah. But the funny thing about moles, they are rarely ever considered in the warrior or fighter class.
Yeah.
Like
almost everything else, like there are exceptions to the general rules, but I can hardly think of any troll or any moles that are fighters.
Uh-huh. But
the moles are basically just the Samwise Gamgees of the the Redwall world.
Yeah, you
where
say that.
They
yeah.
rush into battle with frying pans.
Yeah. Very often. But one great thing the series does is just that they always find great ways to use the animal's given attributes to any given situation. Like
all the strategies.
What are moles
are
good
always
at?
really
They're diggers, of course.
Yeah.
So when they need to figure out a plan involving digging, you bring in the moles because that's their expertise. And like squirrels, of course, are more skilled in the trees, and otters more skilled in the water. So you have all these different skill sets that
And they usually
always
have their
used.
specific weapons that go along with that really well.
Exactly. The otters have their slings. Squirrels
Are good with archery
Yeah.
and arrows raining down from the trees.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Do many other fantasy series employ slings like Redwall does?
Not as much as they should. Like slings
yeah.
are iconic to Redwall.
Very. That always popped out at me. And then we get to the hares. Yeah, hares are on the otter plane of the height scale. That would probably stand in for human or wizard size. They are known for their tremendous appetites
And attitudes.
extremely boisterous
Yes.
attitudes.
They're like the
They are often
Yeah.
used as comic relief, but more than that, they are also skilled fighters. That's what's interesting about hares. That they usually take everything so lightly, but they are often very deadly too.
Yeah. I always liked that dynamic of like having like the boisterous commanders have that duality to them where they're tough when they need to be, but then always joking around and showing that not everything is doom and gloom.
And when you throw all these different personalities and characteristics into any situation, then it's just so unique and great. So much potential to be had, but not so much in the first 3 books, but later on they really get into the elite hare squadron known as the Long Patrol. And that's when you really get into some of the most interesting stuff involving the hares. Hedgehogs
Right.
are probably some of the animals that don't quite get the same spotlight as others.
Yeah.
But they will in certain books, just not as often.
Yeah, they're normally more on the side, like supporting characters.
Yeah. Just kind of there, like, usually, like, there's always a cellar hog in the abbey that guards the ale and the cider a little more than he should, maybe.
Okay, for some reason I just got in my head, I don't know why, just Ray Winstone as on the cellar hog.
Okay, see, we have mentioned before, I feel like Ray Winstone has been, like, horribly miscast as of late. He was born to be a cellar hog.
Basically.
So you could argue he already kind of was as Mr. Beaver in Narnia, but Mr. Beaver is his best role. So if you just have him be Mr. Beaver in
a slightly
Redwall,
gruffer Mr. Beaver.
Like, I think fans ever since Narnia came out, they were like, okay, do Redwall. Because these animals are a very good starting point.
Yeah.
Like, and like effects wise and personality wise.
Yeah.
But yeah, kind of on the dwarf scale, like somewhere between mice and squirrels. Maybe you're about on par with squirrels or hedgehogs. And then yeah, the badgers. Yeah, normally seen as like the noble warriors of the universe. That there are ancient stories and folklore of badger warriors that guard the Lone Mountain Salamandastron, the Badger Fortress. But again, that's why the series has so much potential. That like so many other series, like take Narnia. Like I do agree with some Lion Witch and the Wardrobe worked best as a standalone movie. And then as you get into later books, it's hard to get the focus just right for a movie adaptation. But with Redwall, each book just expands on the lore of the world. Because what's great about the series, it keeps things fresh by almost constantly bouncing back and forth in time. Like you start with the first book, and then the second book is a prequel to the earliest days of the universe. And then the third book is a direct sequel to Redwall. And then it just bounces back and forth from there. It'll go back to the past. It'll go back to the future. It'll find someplace in the middle.
And they tend to repeat a lot of the same formula, but it uses that to like quickly get into the starting point so that then it can build so much of the details and the characteristics and the charm of that specific circumstance.
Yeah. But in the earlier books, like, you don't see a whole lot of the Badgers.
Yeah.
Redwall has the Badger mother who's not necessarily a warrior, and then later on you get to see the warrior side of the Badgers, and that's where Sirius butt is kicked. But that's the thing, the later on you get in the series, the more opportunities there are for bigger and better action beats, which are never lacking even in the early books. But that's the thing about this series. Every single book has not just one, but numerous standout action scenes that are just waiting for someone. Here's the basic layout. Now make it a thing.
Basically,
like,
exactly. Yeah.
Your storyboard is almost like just there for the taking. But then you've got other smaller supporting animals like water voles or other like dormice and
Shrews.
Stuff like that. But the last major animal to note on the good side are the shrews, who are, as far as I can remember, the shrews are always connected to the Goosum tribe, right? They're
pretty much. Like they're always
I can't
more
think of
the
any time.
native scavengers.
Yeah, where there's like a shrew that's not a Goosum shrew. That's the guerrilla union of shrews in Mossflower. That, again, the lore. A solitary tribe of shrews that like roves the surrounding woods of the Redwall Abbey. Shrews are very loud and rowdy and disagreeable with most other animals, and usually with each other as well. That, again, each species has a distinct and memorable personality.
But if you sing a song, then you can make friends.
But more often than not, as I was rereading some of these over the past years, I found that usually shrews are mainly a good excuse for cannon fodder. When the protagonists need a helping hand in battle, they call on the aid of the shrews, and then usually in the background of the battle, it's like, oh, another shrew's dead and another shrew.
Shrews are kind of the red shirts.
You need the battlefield casualties, you always do, but they're basically like, I see them as the elves in the Two Towers, where, the elves have come to our aid, and then, most of them are basically there just to, be cannon fodder.
Yeah. Yeah, they do just disappear. Did they all get killed? Or because, like, I don't think the elves didn't show up in that part in the books, so I think they just forgot because they didn't need to be there afterwards.
But okay, so that rounds out the good animals. Now for the villains, normally referred to as the vermin. Rats?
Mm-hmm.
Or like the mice.
The big beefy rats.
They are usually seen as the main antagonists in a majority of the books.
Right. I meant to say that rats are big, beefy mice.
Yeah, yeah. Rats are big. Rats are mean. There are many opportunities to just have some vile, evil villain characters in movie adaptations. Also in the villain ranks, weasels, ferrets. Sometimes, again, I like how each book will spice it up a bit. Like sometimes you have like back-to-back books that both have rat villains, but then sometimes a weasel will be the main villain, and there will be a slightly different way of thinking than like a rat. Rats are more like just, we're gonna go in, we're gonna conquer all. When you think about it, that's kind of what rats do. They just come in and plunder and pillage and spread everywhere. And then weasels are a little more weaselly, a little more conniving when they're the main focus.
Usually rats are focused on like conquering and taking over. Weasels have more of like a specific, like they want to steal something, or they want a certain goal that they're after.
But then the especially crafty villains are the foxes. Like they are usually the greater minds, that they're always thinking several steps ahead. And again, like foxes would be on the otter and hare scale compared to rats would be smaller than foxes. But again, we're just talking like a head, not like real fox compared to a real rat are substantially different sizes. But yeah, like weasels and ferrets, stoats are also usually saved to fill out the background forces.
Yeah.
Like your orc army. Like when rewatching The Lord of the Rings, I love how you can tell the difference of the species of orc, like between the Orokai and the goblins and the Mordor orcs. That I see that being similar to how you differentiate the weasels and ferrets and stoats.
Pretty much.
Excuse me. Sometimes when you're out in the marshlands and stuff, you'll run across tribes of toads that are just disgusting and not great thinkers. Just
more like primitive cannibalistic
tribes. Just the gross. They're gross and they just eat everything and don't speak great English and stuff like that. But when you have the badgers on the good side, in the villain ranks, you've got wildcats. Now, by book 2, the main villain is a wildcat, and they pop up at least a couple more times later on down the road. Again, I like that they get wildcats out there right out of the gate, and then you go a while before seeing another wildcat again. And then when one shows up again as a villain, like right in the middle of the series, then like it feels like a big deal. And that's kind of like in the early years of the universe, like chronologically in the beginning of the series was kind of the rule of the wildcats, and then that's why you don't see them much later on, because their rule kind of ended and they just weren't around anymore.
But yeah, and it's always interesting, like since badgers are such a force to contend with, it's always interesting to see when something comes along that can match them. Like if a wildcat shows up, or like is a Rackety Tam that has a Wolverine.
Yeah. And see, that's the Wolverine thing. Does someone say a freaking Wolverine?
I don't. Not specifically.
Okay.
I said it.
But yeah, a freaking Wolverine. That I love how each book tries to add some new flavor. That, okay, what, like, whether it's a main villain or just some monster that'll show up later on, like what's a species that like theoretically could exist in this universe that would kind of change the game a little bit. And yeah, that's what Rackety Tam is. Book 17. You're at 17, book 17 in your series, and I consider that one of the standout villains just based on the fact that it's a freaking Wolverine is now your bad guy. And like how his tribe, like, it's considered a big deal that they're basically cannibals, that most of the villains, like, eat meat, but they're not known to eat any of the actual, like, animals that are considered, like,
People.
Like, they'll eat birds and pillage nests and stuff like that usually. But so when you come across a villain who's willing to eat anything he conquers, it's like, it's sick. It's like, oh, that's not good.
Yeah.
But yeah, then usually popping up in about every book, you want to be careful around water because there be pikefishes.
Pikefishes.
Giant sharp teeth freshwater fish that I always imagined great potential there for just ways to, like, either implement them with jump scares or some intensity levels.
Yeah.
And then other, even a way bigger threat than pike are snakes. Snakes are usually just seen as basically the devil himself, that if there's a snake around, you don't want anything to do with that snake. And lizards show up every once in a while. But yeah, like I mentioned, with each book finding a way to spice things up from the next, that there's usually some kind of mutant or deformed animal. I thought of, like, a Thumper in Bug's Life.
Yeah.
What's the matter? You don't like Thumper?
Oh my god, okay.
They're usually used for, like, stalking or tracking prey.
There's always, like, the beast. That's
that may
unleashed
just
at some point.
be rats or other, like theoretically they'd be a more civilized species, but just something happened along the way and now they're just animalistic and
feral.
Feral and kind of disturbing and a real threat. Other monster type creatures that tend to show up every now and again: eels, crabs, sharks when you're on the high seas. A giant scorpion shows up at one point.
Really?
A 3-headed snake shows up later on down the road. And even like some, like, ancient, like, almost dinosaur level, like, Loch Ness monster type prehistoric creature just shows up in later books.
Because why wouldn't you?
Yeah, I love how the game's always changing, it seems like.
Yeah. And there's usually interesting things done with birds, like whether they're just the big beasts or sometimes they're characters that can talk, but, like, they're ones where, like, they're kind of half civilized, where, like, you can talk and barter with them, but they're not quite, like, on the level of people, because they're ones that usually will be more cannibalistic or dangerous.
Like, when you think, like, just regular sized birds like sparrows or magpies, like, those are the ones you just mentioned. But then, like, what you would attribute to more intelligent birds like owls or eagles or hawks, that they're usually on an even speaking plane with the other protagonists. But yeah, still seen as you're still a little bit of a threat. I want to be careful. You're a wild one. But I always thought of eagles as, like, not as big, like, sort of dragons of the universe.
Basically.
That. And again, we talk in Rango rules here.
Yeah.
So basically think like the hawk in that compared to the rest of the animals. And like, that's how I kind of pictured snakes too. That when a snake shows up, it is much bigger than the rest of the animals. And other birds, like one time when a heron shows up, and swans. Oh, don't forget the swans. I love that. Do you not remember the swans?
Which one are they in?
They're in several.
Several. Okay.
I want to say they don't show up immediately. Those are the ones I immediately linked to dragons. That's funny. You think, oh, what's wrong with a swan? When you research swans and how aggressive they can be in real life, just take that and put it in a fantasy setting
where your protagonists are little mice.
Yeah, and usually they're in situations where you'll you'll be following like a supporting villain character that think like a Jurassic Park type situation, like Dennis Nedry out in the woods and he's lost and he doesn't know where to go next, and then just one you just saw the Pee-wee Herman that was great, the Pee-wee Herman cut of Jurassic Park.
Just him attacking Nedry was one of the most beautiful things I've seen.
It was beautiful.
Go ahead and scream your head off. We're miles from where anyone can hear you.
But yeah, just imagine that scene, except instead of that tiny little frilled dinosaur, it's a dragon-sized swan out on the water. Like, there was a scene where a swan just... I want to say several books where swans absolutely destroy characters. Like, just they're left as a mangled corpse. And like, okay, and now we get into, with all the species set up, these books rock.
Yeah.
You think, on its face, oh, fuzzy little mice with swords. What's so great about that? Well, joke's on you, Dad. Fuzzy mice with swords kick ass. Yeah, these are books that are primarily aimed at school children. I started the series, like, I want to say 3rd grade, maybe. But they are so hardcore.
Yeah. Like, I know I've read that, like, Brian Jakes wanted to write books for kids, but did not want to, like, sugarcoat war. That he wanted to portray violence accurately and show that good characters will die.
Thank you, Mr. Jakes. See, yeah, you kind of just summed up everything great about this series. Again, think of it as Lord of the Rings. Like, you start off in the Shire. Like, things are happy. Things are fun. Kids can enjoy it. And then it slowly dips its toe in. Okay, now we've got a threat. And now you're setting up that threat. So when you get to the violent payoff, it just feels earned. It feels like the natural place. If you've got these vile, evil characters trying to capture and enslave and defeat these peace-loving characters, they need to be defeated.
Yeah.
And, like, there is blood. There are beheadings. There are dismemberments. I remember specifically background characters getting cleaved in two. Left and right, characters are stabbed, shot with arrows. They're poisoned. They're eaten, either by a snake or a swan. Like, death. Lots and lots of death. But again, it's earned. And like you say, that's why these books are so emotionally investing. Major characters die in every single book.
And that's the great thing about each book having a new cast of characters. You can kill off as many as you want.
Yeah. And that's the thing. When you're jumping around chronologically, like the 3rd book is a direct sequel to Redwall, Madame EO. And then that's the end of the main Matthias storyline.
Yeah.
And then, like, you've got the Martin the Warrior trilogy that's spread up between books 2, 6, and 12. And that trilogy isn't even told chronologically either. And then, like the Matthias duo, you have the Mario of Redwall, book 4 and book 7 are immediately connected chronologically. And The Bellmaker is an immediate sequel. That's another thing it has going for it. If you make this a movie series, a lot of times you can see interest kind of wear out if, we've been following the same characters for so long and nothing, like the status quo hasn't really changed. Like, think of like the recent Star Trek series that at the box office it had diminishing returns because it's a Star Trek reboot starring Kirk, Spock, and the gang. Awesome. We haven't seen those characters in a while. What's the next one about? It's about Kirk, Spock and the gang. Okay, what's the next one? Oh, Kirk, Spock, and all the other characters. None of them are gonna die because they're all so famous. That when you're spicing up the status quo like this, that then certain books you can look forward to an immediate sequel later down the road if you were a fan of that storyline, but then like you're left anticipating that while then still keeping it fresh with the same setting and personalities that keep the series great, but a whole new batch of characters, usually in a story that can be just as investing. But yeah, let's dive into the very first book, Redwall. That would be the focus of this adaptation. Okay, so the idea of the garden wall guy, Patrick McHale, writing this, I'm a little sad that they just didn't give him every duty. Like he was on top of every single facet of Garden Wall. So the idea of, like, when you think of Garden Wall, like, one of his primary objectives was to give modern children like a more laid back, kind of old timey fantasy vibe. But
kind of a modern fairy tale.
Yeah, exactly. But could keep their interest with great characters and personalities.
Yeah.
That's exactly what Redwall needs. A new kind of fairy tale, a new kind of fantasy that needs to hearken directly to an older and simpler time. But then modern audiences aren't going to get bored because there are so many great personalities and characters to fall in love with.
Yeah, that's so much personality, so much action if you have the guts to pull it off.
And, okay, talking about guts. What Garden Wall has, it's got some guts. Like, when we're talking about things like how the books portray snakes, if we're getting a movie written by the guy who gave us the I want to feed scene.
Which scene?
I'm sorry, my turtles, but I must feed. Oh my god, okay.
Lorna?
But
with a snake? See, that's a ghostly ghoul.
Yeah.
Like, that's inherently scarier than just a snake. So then, to me, that means you just have more free reign to make it scarier.
Yeah, have a giant snake, like, you can do the big toothy grin chasing after you. Because, yeah, like,
just high tension.
Because thinking of it as a mice perspective, a mouse being chased down a cave by a snake, it would look like just this floating toothy grin,
right?
Just flying
this
at
face
you
in the dark. Yeah. All my life, I've been looking forward to them adapting Redwall, but just that part of me that lives through recent adaptations like Artemis Fowl, I'm like, don't you dare mistreat this.
Yeah.
If this goes wrong, this has the potential to just completely and utterly wreck me if it doesn't work out. So the fact that right off the bat, you announce this project and you announce that he will write it, that has me so relieved. That I'm still really curious to see who they get to direct, but you're one step closer. But yeah, so let's just go over key points of the first book real quick. It follows Matthias. Again, Matthias is an iconic character.
Basically,
for the Redwall fans.
Our Luke Skywalker.
Easily.
That he starts out as the simple,
like, it's a
peaceful old mouse.
It's a I want more kind of hero's journey.
Yes, definitely a good example of a hero's journey. And then, yeah, like, going from, like, Redwall is what sets him up turning from a simple do-gooder into a warrior, and then Matameo is like showing him kind of at his prime where he's actually out there doing stuff.
To me, it's a very believable growth from just a humble Abby Mouse who turns into a warrior by the end of it.
Yeah.
Like, regular Abby Mice are like, it's kind of a monastery situation. Like, they've got their little robes, and they're taught that peace is the only option.
Yeah.
So that's what makes it so interesting then when they're getting attacked by these rats, then there's that
dilemma,
internal dilemma of, well, our first course of action should be peace. Well, we tried that. Now we need to fight, but there's not that many fighters here. So we gotta, it's half turning the Abbey into fighters, and then half collecting fighters from elsewhere, like Basil Staghair or Jess the Squirrel, that show up later.
And it's interesting that, like, the Abbey was founded in part by Martin the Warrior, who's basically their King Arthur. And
almost
so, like,
the patron saint.
Basically.
Like, they don't worship him, but they look up to him for guidance. They know that there would be no Abbey if it wasn't for Martin.
And so, like, they have a history of having warriors in the Abbey, but kind of lost that for a while. And so then Matthias is interested in that, and then kind of when they decide that, peace isn't an option, we're going to have to fight, he goes on a quest to try and resurrect the Abbey warrior tradition.
Exactly.
And so really, like, some of the books that take place after that, the closest they get to referencing Matthias is just keeping up with the tradition of there being an Abbey warrior.
That then they decide, okay, we need to have an honorary Redwall warrior as often as we can. Yeah, you just see that growth for later books, and the characters are inspired by what came before. But the catalyst for
the inciting incident.
Yeah, the inciting incident that brings threat to the peaceful Abbey is Clooney the Scourge. Again, we are talking Luke and Vader level villains here that, to the fans, Clooney is like the villain. Like, there are so many memorable villains as you go on in the books, but Clooney is still like top tier. Like, has so much potential for a movie. Like, the motivation's pretty simple. He just sees the Abbey as a source of power, and to any other animal, and normally the villains, the Abbey's kind of built up as this legend that they think it's filled to the brim with jewels and gold and stuff, when it has much humbler aspirations than that, but they see it as a prize to be won.
Or like, now I'm fuzzy on the details, but I know, like, Clooney was described as like being a bilge rat, which means he grew up on a ship. So like, thinking if he's like the big tough rat that survived a ship, and so then is now kind of like, I'm pretty sure it sets him up like he's been wandering with his crew for a while, and then
in search of the Abbey.
Okay, so they are searching for the Abbey. I couldn't remember if they're looking for the Abbey or if they essentially just crash land there and are like, hey, there's a safe place, let's go raid it.
Again, I reread it not so long ago. I can't remember. There were certain details after the last time I read it where, like, in my mind I was trying to piece together how to, like, build upon the book for an adaptation. So in my mind, I feel like I remember them finding a map that led them there. But in my mind, I see it as
seeking it out.
Yeah, exactly. But I like how the first book portrays the early negotiations, that at first he tries to take advantage of them, and he's not really that bad, and tries to outsmart them, but then plays his cards too early And then, okay, we're just going to demolish you then because you're a bunch of peace-loving hippies, that it's going to be so easy. That he has these expectations that, we can wipe out these silly mice easy, but then there's always some hidden weapon that either the mice have the badger that the rats see, Constance the badger, and are like, that's a badger, we could take care of the mice easy, but if that badger is let
and
loose,
because even though she's an old maiden badger that isn't a warrior, she can still throw a big ass table across a room at you.
Yeah. And yeah, like when characters like Basil show up, who he's a army veteran, so then when he comes into play, he's got more of the battle strategy mind to help whip him into shape and stuff like that. But just very interesting twists and turns that differentiate it from other war story type books or movies. Like halfway through the book, Clooney's like completely taken out of commission. Like he is deeply wounded. So then halfway, right when they've started this battle, then both sides just gotta stop, and the villains are waiting for Clooney to re-heal, and then that's when they introduce like the healers, the fox healers, Sayla and Chicken Hound. And that stuff's interesting because then they come in and they're trying to play both sides. Sneaking information back and forth. So then part of the book, your main villain is just stuck in bed trying to lead an army and devise battle strategies, and then the rest of his forces are growing restless and trying to decide whether to mutiny or not. But
random thought, but thinking of like how there's usually a bunch of different players kind of scheming their own schemes,
and that is a main focus on
could
Redwall.
it also be sort of like kids fantasy Animal Fargo? Each book is a new setting, but with a similar setup, but then lots of quirky characters and scheming.
You say that, and it's kind of what it is. Just like, just throw some battle scenes in there that when you're just talking like the plot setup, because each book has so many characters.
Yes. A whole ensemble.
Just the first book, like after the main ones, Clooney and Matthias, and then you've got essentially the spirit of Martin the Warrior in there, that basically an Obi-Wan Kenobi Force Ghost kind of.
Yeah.
That will show up in visions if things are getting terribly hard for the characters. Yeah, then, like, on top of Constance the Badger, Matthias' mentor figure, Methuselah the ancient historian, Basil, Jess the squirrel, and her mute son, Sam, who's just a Dibbin. Who's a Dibbin? The Dibbins are the babies. See, again, we're talking lore here. Redwall lore. You've probably never heard the term Dibbin before. That is another thing that's exclusive only to Redwall. Dibbins be babies, yo. Yeah, that's what they call. They're young.
The little mouse babies.
It's so charming and cute. Dibbins.
Sometimes annoying.
Oh yeah, I'm saying the name Dibbin.
Yes, the name Dibbins.
As you go on, the Dibbins can wear a little thin. So the guy that gave us Greg,
yes,
is going to be writing Dibbins. See, that
please let it work.
Makes me relieved.
Yeah.
Because later on, you need to either rewrite or cut entirely some of the Dibbin storylines, because those really get redundant.
Like,
in
most of the time, even though they're kids' books, like, it doesn't automatically feel like it's being kiddie. Usually anything involving the Dibbins feels like, it's just there to make the kids happy in case they're getting a little tired after all the bloodshed and stuff like that. And
see, even if adult me is like, okay, Dibbins, you're wearing a little thin, I understand it. Because these are still books for children that have blood and battle scenes in them, so it helps balance the scales. That's why you really need to make these, like, fans wouldn't have it any other way. They have to be PG-13 if you're making them direct adaptations. They have to be. But it lessens the blow a little bit when you've got some cuter, happier moments to balance it out. But then you've got Warbeak Sparrow and the Sparrow Clan.
Yeah.
That show up midway, that live on the roof of the Abbey, that there's this entire just tribe of sparrows that hardly have anything to do with the mice, because mice ain't climbing up on no roof until they need to. That, again, very interesting plot developments. But yeah, when there's that midpoint where the main villain can't do anything, so both sides are just sitting around while the villains are waiting for him to heal, the heroes go on basically a Last Crusade treasure hunt to find the missing sword of Martin the Warrior.
That's another...
And so that's a major plot point. And each book basically has some kind of treasure hunt with riddles and clues. And that's another thing that is very unique to Redwall.
Very, yeah.
That maybe Harry Potter has a certain aspect of, there's a missing thing that we need to find in a secret cavern or whatever. But Harry Potter never went full Indiana Jones. That Redwall does on more than one occasion.
The
shield is the second marker. Like, we're talking that kind of stuff. But yeah.
Then you throw in all the stuff with the adder.
Asmodeus.
Yeah.
The snake. Yeah, how this all ties into each other is so great. Really, really tight plotting here. But yeah, talking just the notable supporting roles that, like, we're not even gonna get into here, but just in the first book, you've got Cornflower, the love interest. You've got Abbot Mortimer. You've got Brother Alf. You've got the Skipper of Otters. You've got Winifred the Otter. You've got Ambrose Spike, the Cellar Hog. You've got Formole, the leader of the moles. You've got Cheese Thief, the dim-witted rat on the villain side. You've got Shadow, the expert thief rat that shows up near the beginning. Kind of that book's like special arsenal, that he's more a clear thinker character, where then later on they introduce the demented animalistic villain additions. For Hugo, Lug and the Shrews, King Bull Sparrow, the leader of the sparrows, the big threatening sparrow. That, like, this is just the first book, and each book has like more and more and more like actual named supporting characters that play some kind of part.
It is really similar to the scale of something like Lord of the Rings, where like every tribe, every country, every hilltop of Mossflower Wood has some special group with a specific backstory and a standout leader. And there's always, like, going on adventures and negotiating and figuring out who's the allies and who's gonna help fight off the baddies.
But yeah, just, you've got all this stuff in every single book. So, like, I would be extremely disappointed if we ever got an adaptation that was less than 2 hours. That,
like, thered be no way to do it
justice.
Right.
You need that amount of time. Like back in the beginning, the first couple Harry Potter movies were like 160 minutes a pop. Like just think, within a month of each other, you had a 160-minute Harry Potter and then the 3-hour Fellowship of the Ring. And it seems like no one wants to take those chances anymore. That's like, well, you can't make an animated movie that's 2.5 hours. Are you nuts?
Which is why
make
I kind of
one.
like the
make
idea.
One then.
Yeah. Which is why I also kind of like the idea of making some of them into shows and miniseries too.
Yeah, like that would help spread out the meat of it, and that way you would get your proper runtime to fit everything in. But if that's at the cost of proper production values, like, okay, so...
Which, to me, if it's like it being produced by Netflix, I would assume that there wouldn't be much of a difference between production values on a movie or
would
a show.
hope.
Because like technically, it's anything they do will technically be like on a TV level if it's a TV movie, but then streaming has gotten so good that like you can get pretty good production value even out of a show.
Okay, and now that's why I'm even more excited for this, that Netflix is the right company to do this. Like, I'd seen a few fan takes, oh, Disney should make Redwall. Not Disney, at Disney, all. Not right now, no. Yeah, I do not concur with that.
Disney's burned us too many times.
Yeah, that you need a company that is willing to take chances, that sees this series for what it is, and let's pay due respect to the source material.
And a company that has little to no history of studio meddling. Like Netflix is not known for being controlling.
The only thing that they're really viewed in a negative light for is when they will greenlight literally any show imaginable, but then if that show doesn't perform well, then they just axe it. See, that's the only thing that Redwall has to lose. If it doesn't get in the proper viewership, then they'll just say, okay, we're not making Redwall movies anymore. So to me, that just
so spread the word. Tell your friends.
There's more opportunity to then make it something so fantastic that like you'd be an idiot not to or you'd be an idiot to miss out on it.
Yeah.
And another thing that has me excited lately in company conference calls and interviews, the CEO of Netflix has shared not a little interest, describing it as a personal goal that he wants to dethrone Disney to become the animation giant of the world.
Ooh, that's interesting.
You would accomplish that with a top-tier Redwall series.
Yeah.
If you give it the first-rate production, design, and animation quality that the series deserves, then that will get you there.
And I will be very curious to see what they reveal about the animation style. Because, like, of course, the dream is like Rango level.
Because when's the last time? Like, Rango was at the beginning of the decade. Like, I feel like
10 years ago,
most animated movies just exactly 10 years ago. It's almost March. Rango came out in March 2011.
Rango was 10 years ago. I know
that same year you had Rango and Tintin, and then it seemed like
those are like the peak of animation.
Those didn't perform fantastic at the box office, so then studios kind of leveled off on doing the groundbreaking animation extravaganzas.
But yeah, like I know it seems like we've had a slightly different takes on this, because like I would be more willing to see like a stylized animation. To me, the dream would be something like Rango or Tintin. If you can't do that, like if you can't pull off the photorealistic CG, I would almost prefer to go with a simpler animation style, like some sort of 2D, 3D hybrid that was still had plenty of effort put into it.
Mm-hmm. And this isn't quite the same, but where I'm coming from, we already had a Redwall adaptation with simpler animation. There was already a TV show in the 1990s that, as a child, I watched one episode of that show and went, nah.
Because that wasn't a great show anyway.
I already had the expectations in my head. Some fans like it.
Really?
But I already had the expectations in my head of next level, top tier shit. That, to me, it deserves nothing less. And the one lesson I seem to be getting from Netflix is they can do whatever the flip they want. So if they wanted to give this the budget to do photoreal, never before seen animation, they can do it.
Yeah.
They've got the money. They've got the viewership. But I'm also very curious to see who they'd get for a composer, because that's another thing. Like, I just want to see Lord of the Rings production values all the way, because I keep saying it, we've never had another Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Like, nothing that even came close to the level of just game
Like,
changing.
that's going to be 20 years ago soon.
That Lord of the Rings gave us. And right here, again, it is just your map to a new Lord of the Rings. And like Lord of the Rings, that had a cheaper animated adaptation that has its fans, but most view it as, you tried. So then just, you got nowhere to go but up. I do share the sentiment. You could do a very atmospheric, stylized look, but I would prefer you only do that for the TV show. Now, they have also announced that they're going to do a Martin the Warrior event series, they describe it as. That makes me think the only thing they would make a series would be Martin the Warrior. Now, I like the idea. When you say Martin the Warrior, do you mean the character or the book? Because those are two very different things. The very first book to include Martin the Warrior is Mossflower. And if you are going to adapt Mossflower, now that is the thing I demand, that you give Mossflower the highest production value, because that is arguably the biggest scale book. Like, the climax of that book is a freaking castle falling into a sinkhole while a battle ensues around. And the main hero and villain are sword fighting to the backdrop of a castle plunging into an abyss. Come on. See, that's why I'm not happy with, like, TV show quality. Like, I need next level CGI there. That's so realistic, because most of these things you're only going to get the one shot.
Yeah.
But, okay, now, if you're talking Martin the Warrior book, which takes place before Mossflower, so then that would make sense if you want to hold on to Mossflower to do a movie, but before you do that movie, you want to chronologically tell Martin's story. I am fine with making both Martin the Warrior and Legend of Luke, the third book in the Martin trilogy, a show.
Yeah, like, cause like what I was thinking, there's more of the kind of, like, I guess, primary timeline books, and then there's kind of the lore books, and like I said, Martin is basically their King Arthur, so if you gave a series that was just devoted to him and his many side adventures and why he's this big, important historical figure, which would set up for the larger scale movies, that would make sense. I like that idea.
And Martin the Warrior, the book, was never a standout to me personally in the way that Mossflower was.
Yeah, it was.
I can't even remember who the villain was.
A little mellower. Yeah.
I mean, each and every book has more than enough potential to be adapted. Any book that might be considered lesser, that means you just get more free reign to spice it up and rejigger the things that need a little work. Because, as you go on, the series does hit more than a few redundancies. That you get a few recycled plot points, like the villains always get, or not the villains, the Dibbins always getting into some kind of shenanigans and getting kidnapped by a bad guy. That happens a lot. And later books, it seems like every single book, there's always, here come the Dibbins. They've formed their little ragtag group. Dibbins against bad times. They don't like bats. That was cute in one book, but then they keep bringing that up book after book after book, and it's like, and lots of little gags, like, there's some random Abbey dweller who really likes garlic, so he always smells like garlic, and then the other Abby Foker, oh no, the smell of garlic, oh, like that's a recurring bit that like goes on like with different characters. Like there always ends up being a character who likes garlic, and it's like
little bit of garlic, little bit of butter.
That just needed the one joke, and you could let it go.
But yeah, and I'm not as passionate of a person just in general as you usually are. But
I'm passionate could be a descriptor.
To show how much a part of my psyche this is,
yes, please.
I've had multiple dreams about Redwall adaptions.
I don't think I've had a single one. That makes me sad.
Usually it's about like things going awry. Like I had a dream,
an adaptation gone wrong.
Yeah. Like I had a dream that Blue Sky got the rights to it.
See.
And so like, although I feel like that one had kind of an arc, like it was just sort of like we saw the trailers and we're like,
that would be
no,
the death of me.
They've turned Redwall into like an Ice Age sequel. And then we saw the movie and it was like, okay, this is more like Epic, which wasn't bad, but not Redwall. Don't do that to Redwall.
Yeah, see, like Epic was fine for what Epic was,
but if you compare it to Redwall, then it would suck.
If we, like completely, that would be a massive disappointment.
And then I forget if this was before or after. I know I had a dream. I can barely remember what actually happened, but Katie, her sister, was digging around in the library basement.
In your dream?
Yeah, in my dream, and unearthed a like secret archival footage of a Jim Henson produced Redwall movie.
And what did that entail?
I can't remember much. Like, I know we watched it and we were just like, what is this? But I feel like it was maybe one of those situations where like I woke up right when it started getting good, but like just looking at the box, like, and it's weird if you say Jim Henson Redwall, like he would
Emmett Otter meets Dark Crystal. I mean,
yeah, he would put a lot of effort into it. I can imagine what those characters would look like. For some reason in the dream, that wasn't what it was. Like it looked more like the mice, like they weren't like his Emmett Otter animals. They were more like not just brown Fraggles, but like they didn't look like animals. They just looked like these weird scruffy little puppet creatures.
Interesting.
But yeah, we were just like, well, why haven't we heard of this before? Why was this buried? And then we watched it. Oh.
Oh.
And again, thinking of how much of an impact this has had on my life.
Oh boy.
Like, I didn't realize until somewhat recently how much of an influence the Redwall books had on my writing style. That thinking
you like
about
fantasy.
Yeah. That like thinking like, cause yeah, I grew up watching more movies than reading books, but like with Lord of the Rings and Narnia and things like that definitely influenced me. But when I broke down some of like the core setups and kind of the way I structured my plots, especially for some of the earlier books, I realized, Redwall was probably the primary influence for just the idea of having the type of conflict that I usually have and an ensemble of characters and stuff like that.
That's interesting. You mentioned Blue Sky.
The now defunct Blue Sky.
I have some thoughts on that, but one thing that's always been so weird with them is that they'll get some really talented actors to do voice work in those, and then they'll make really horrible decisions. They were the worst when it came to like the celebrity guest star or the musician, the pop star. Get Bruno Mars in your Rio movie or Pitbull in Epic, Steven Tyler, that kind of thing. And that is actually the one aspect that I feel like they'll knock it out of the park no matter what. If you have someone making a serious, accurate adaptation, the voice cast is probably going to be top notch.
It's
no
gotta
matter
be.
what you do, because there's just a pantheon of fantastic British actors.
Yeah.
Have I mentioned these books are very British?
But
like the entire world was just found the whole cast of Harry Potter just so endearing.
Yeah.
And now that Harry Potter's run its course, just we need something new to fill that British void in our hearts. But yeah, I'm interested to see what things they rejigger from the first book, like those discrepancies that he fixed later on in terms of the world. Like in the first book, that's the thing. There's the iconic image of when they first come across Clooney and his rat army.
Yeah.
They're riding on top of a hay cart pulled by a horse that looks like it shot straight out of hell.
Yeah. Except horses don't exist.
Except horses don't exist. Then later on, he was like, "Oh, any big animal, like I just want the forest critters."
Yeah.
Like Basil Stag Hare, it's in the name, a stag. Deer don't exist in this universe after. And like in my mind, like later on, you've got characters like Captain Snow and the Barn Cat.
Right.
That was another thing. Like you introduce then wildcats later, that are like the Hulk equivalent to the rest of the animals. In this book, a barn cat's like the size of a regular cat to a regular mouse. So I'm like that. I don't know how you retool Clooney's entrance. Just have him walk in, I guess, without a main interest. I don't know, but with those characters, I always felt like they're basically the Tom Bombadil of Redwall. That they are very charming for the book that they're in, but when making a movie, it would be so easy to just change it that Matthias finds out from Basil that he needs to go talk to Captain Snow the Owl, who is having a feud with the Barn Cat, which leads him to the shrews. So all you have to do is Basil shows Matthias where to find the shrews.
Yeah.
And because then so much more happens after that and before that. So like that's not something that's integral to the story. And something I find interesting that stood out to me at a very young age, whose beliefs are fairly conservative, and I've never considered myself a feminist or anything. These books are a prime example of strong female leads. Like, that always stood out to me, especially later books. I'm like, hey, you just got a bunch of really cool characters in here. Several books, the main characters are female that go out and kick butt and wield swords. And every book has, like, several standout female characters that kick serious butt all the time.
Yeah, because there's so many books, it tries to give kind of like every variation or combination time to kick butt. Like it gives, like how like there'll be a character, there'll be mice, there'll be rabbits. Like it'll focus on different areas. So sometimes it'll be on the men, sometimes it'll be on the women equivalents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These books were almost a little ahead of their time, if you ask me, because now it's all the rage to get your kick butt female warrior. But back when these were a thing, that wasn't that common.
Like, to me, it wasn't necessarily ahead of its time as much as it was just good. Because, like, nowadays, I feel like if you were to have any element of girl power, it would need to be advertised as like girl power, but like these books don't advertise it as like girl power. It's just natural because that's the story. That's the type of books they are. They give all the characters time to kick butt.
And I don't remember once there ever being, hey, wait, you're a girl. Girls can't fight. Because like the whole thing of the first book, like Matthias is a mouse. Mice aren't known fighters. And then he becomes one by the end, and so that's just a natural part of the series. Just a call to action, and the characters that will heed that call. Okay, so let's touch on a little more of the lore that stands out from book to book. Food is like the integral building block in this foundation that I want a full word count of every description of food in this entire series.
Shoot,
Like,
what?
that would probably be a quarter of the series is devoted to food.
Yeah, and because like there are certain words that I know from that, but now I can't remember what do they call like their not ale, but like they always have like their strawberry
Strawberry fizz.
strawberry cordial.
I mean, it is cordial, but the strawberry cordial is the strawberry fizz.
Okay, gotcha. But
Yeah,
I think cordial was the word that I was
Okay.
looking for. But yeah, you're right. But yeah, there's certain things that are popped into like now ingrained in my head because of Redwall. Like you talk about cordials, I'm going to think of cellar hogs. And if you talk about candied chestnuts, I'm going to think about Dibbins trying to sneak a few after supper time.
See, the food is in and of itself a major character in these books almost. Like, okay, these mice that live in this abbey, what exactly do they do there? They make and consume food. That's what they do. These guys are always,
They live and breathe it.
yeah, they're hosting like top shelf raves all the time.
It usually starts with like the pattern that it follows is that it starts
There's
with
a familiar
big
pattern, yeah.
feast that
Always,
then
always a
ends
big feast.
with some tragedy hitting.
Uh-huh.
So it's like, oh, everything's happy, there's all the foods. Oh no, but there's an enemy on the hill. Stuff like that.
But that's the thing. It starts with a big feast, and then in the middle, hey, let's have this wonderful picnic. Picnics aren't feasts. Oh, then let's have the celebration. Celebrations are much different than feasts. And like any opportunity, it's like just let's make a crap ton of food and let's describe it all, and your mouth's going to be watering, and you're going to be so hungry.
The rabbits and otters have a eating competition.
All the time.
Competitions
Yeah.
are different than everything else you just said.
Yep, exactly. See? Any excuse there is for food, there will be food.
There will be food.
And songs.
And so-
With food
Yeah.
comes the songs.
Oh yeah, trivia. I forgot to read up. I should have read up more on this to have some more trivia to offer. But like, I know I read at some point that and maybe you knew this already, but I think it's interesting that one reason why there's such an emphasis on food is that Brian Jakes grew up more poor and not having much food, so he would fantasize about all the food that there
Wow.
could be.
That's deep, man.
And so then now his books are all like the kind of the realization of that fantasy where it's all about food.
That is crazy. I like finding this stuff out.
Uh-huh.
I know when you read the background of his, like, his many careers and talents, like, he just went all over the place.
Uh-huh.
Like, it is extensive and fascinating.
And that's probably why like he's good at writing a large cast of entertaining characters, because it seems like he probably had the life where he met a large amount of entertaining characters.
With interesting and memorable dialects.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, like, the songs are very fun and a very memorable part of the
Me being an
series.
impatient boy, I would usually skip.
But yeah, no, you're right. The more books you'd read, the more it's like, okay, I'll just hearing a song and reading the lyrics of a song without the melody are two very different things. So then when you tell me you've got the guy who gave us the wort in the tavern scene from Garden Wall, adapting Redwall songs, that is perfect. That is absolutely perfect.
Yes, with all my heart, that is the only way you should.
That's how you do the entertaining side of the songs, and then I would just hope that there'd be more than a few examples of like
Dwarf anthems.
dwarf anthems, that and Pippin's song in
Yeah.
Return of the King.
Yes,
like
yes,
also use them at key dramatic points. Do not skimp on the drama. Like, make it hit and make it hit hard, because there
it
are
punchy.
more than enough scenes. Like, even the first book, like characters that die. That like,
Gotta have balls.
yeah, these are pretty dark books when they want to be. That's the thing. I love it when darkness comes in spurts, and then it hits and like you can't shake it off. Like it hurts. The spurts hurt in your soul. I love how in the Redwall universe seasons are the equivalent of years, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, they're animals. They have shorter lifespans than humans. That's ingenious, really. That's how he makes the animal to human equivalent work even better than like they still feel like human characters. I like how the vermin have hell gates and the protagonists have the dark forest. Like bad guys are always saying, "Oh, I'm gonna take you down the hell gates" or something, and like in the okay, see, talking about dark, the first book has Clooney going almost mad with visions of getting pulled into hell by Morton the Warrior.
Basically.
But yeah, when characters die or are on the cusp of death, they're at the gates of the dark forest or something. But like that's all they get into. That it's very vague beyond that. That's just how they perceive death. But yeah, like how there's always an abbot or abbess of Redwall, the less sovereign ruler and more just guiding light.
Yeah.
That's usually full of all the wisdoms. Hurrah. Later books, or I mean, just the next book, Mossflower. See, Mossflower introduces Salamandastron.
Yeah.
The book that does that, I want to be given movie level production values. Your introduction to Salamandastron, the Badger Mountain. That the thing about badgers that why they're always held in such high esteem and like legendary status, like no book has any more than a handful of badgers at most. Like there's usually like either just one badger lord at Salamandastron or a badger helper at Redwall. Like that's why they're seen as such legends, that you don't come across badgers that often. And with badgers come blood wrath.
Yeah.
Like I want to say it isn't until the fifth book, maybe, Salamandastron, where they fully introduce the blood wrath. And isn't that funny to think that it takes that long?
Because that's the biggest one where it really goes into the badger lore.
Like that is a big deal, because every book on, if a badger shows up, he's gonna have the blood wrath sooner or later, which is basically just the Hulk-sized badger finally hulking out. When they get the blood wrath, their eyes go red. All they see is carnage. If you're a friend, you get the hell out of their way. They cannot stop until the sun starts getting real low or something. But yeah, that's always when maximum carnage. The bad guys ain't gonna make it out this one. Basically, every book has a formal, a skipper of otters, and a log-a-log shrew chieftain that are always referred to as formal, log-a-log, or skipper, even though they're completely different characters about every single time. And I'd be interested to see if this ever surely will become a long-lasting series. Like, then it's up to you, the makers, to be clever about it. I mean, if you want to blur them all together, especially with the shrews, that wouldn't be a horrible choice. But
looking at the clones on Clone Wars, they're technically the same people, but they're not.
That's a good example.
So that's really what you'd need to do with some of the background tribes, like the otters or the shrews, especially, where like you can give them personality while still having them all like kind of be the same type of character.
Or I'd like to see if they can differentiate them enough just by design or actor to make them stand apart a little more. Because, I mean, they usually play the exact same role in every book anyway.
Pretty much. Hey, one comment I wanted to bring up.
Yes.
With the article that released this, and like it had quotes from, I forget who it was, if it was like the head of the estate or something.
Really? Do tell.
Like they had one quote that was attributed to someone like who had like previously owned or managed the rights, and then they had another quote that didn't have an attribution, so I assumed it was just from the same person. But it was, Brian would have been very happy to see that Netflix shares his joys and desires for bringing his stories to life as a new universe of films, series, and potentially much more for audiences of all ages to enjoy. Did Brian Jakes want adaptations? I thought I always heard that he didn't want it to be adapted.
From what I can remember, he feared it going wrong. That he forbid adaptations, which is funny because I thought he liked the show well enough. But after that, like, there was a big thing. He was not going to allow a movie adaptation until his death, and then sadly he did. But yeah, I feel like I saw something there where, yeah, he did not want it to fall into the wrong hands, like Jim Henson and Disney or something like that. Or Artemis Fowl and Disney.
Or everything else at Disney. Disney and Disney. Disney's fallen into the wrong hands. It's Disney. Just beating that dead mouse over and over again.
Mickey's beating himself. So that sounds awfully similar to what people usually say when a new series is acquired, but hearing it still does
put a smile on my
yeah it gives me hope.
Yeah, it gave me hope that someone cared, but then there was that still little inkling of like, hopefully, like, if people are acting too happy or too excited, that sometimes is a little uneasy, but everything else about this seems to be going in the right direction. So.
And, like, if Disney was able to give us the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe adaptation that they did, it was willing to go dark, then Netflix can go dark.
Yeah, no question there.
Yeah, surely the same company that greenlit the frickin' Dark Crystal revival and put serious money into that.
Money.
And that was like, they knew it was a one-time thing. And think of the level of talent that pulled in, too. And now you've got that they had to come up with from scratch. And Redwall, you just gotta be smart about it.
Yeah.
That's it. But a brief look over the list of movies, or potential movies. Like, again, I really like how they tend to shift the focus from Redwall to Salamandastron, which is a great distance from Redwall. Like half of Mossflower is them trying to reach the Badger Fortress. That's like out in the desert by the sea. And how later books get into, like, again, like when I was laying down all the other fantasy movies or fantasy series that are just lumped into this one, throw Pirates of the Caribbean in there too. Like, at least a third of these books have seafaring adventures and pirates and traveling to island fortresses.
And because his more adult-oriented books are entirely pirate-centered.
Yeah.
So there's definitely that element of it.
Okay, so you said you hadn't gotten all the way through the series. What was the last one you read?
Let's see.
You read Rackety Tam. Did you read them in order?
No, I did not.
My very first book I read was The Long Patrol.
Really?
Yeah. Here, Long Patrol is book 10. See, this needs to be a series because we're talking 10 books in. That is a great book.
That's probably one of the ones I need to read next, then. I haven't read that one.
You haven't read Long Patrol? No. Come on, it's all about the hares. Like, that's perfect. By book 10, that's what I'm talking about, spicing things up. Like, okay, say audiences are a little tired. Okay, Mice with Swords. I've seen one. I've seen them all. Oh, wait, I remember liking the hares. The hares are really fun. There's one just focused on the hares, but doesn't leave Redwall out of it. Just a bunch of hares going to Redwall.
I really haven't read
Ragtag group of
many,
hares
then.
that kick butt and take names.
Yeah, I read in order Redwall, Mossflower, Matameo, Mariel,
Good.
Salamandastron, Martin the Warrior, the
Redwall,
Veilmaker.
Mossflower, and Matameo are the holy trinity, if you ask me.
So I read the first 7 in order. Then I jumped to Lord Brocktree,
Lord Brocktree is another one of my favorites.
Rackety Tam, and Marl Fox. And I think that's all I've read. So 10.
Okay.
I've read 10. So about half.
So those later ones you mentioned are the highlights. You did say Loam Hedge.
Not Loam.
Not Loam Hedge?
No. Lord Brocktree.
Not Loam Hedge?
Lord Brocktree, Rackety Tam,
Rackety Tam,
and Marl Fox
Dumbo,
are the
yeah.
3 that I read after I stopped reading in order.
Those are all some of the highlights of the later years. Like post Rackety Tam, like Hyrule Lane, EULALIA, Doom White, Sable Green, Rogue Crew, especially the final 3. I can't remember a thing about the final 3, but I know Hyrule Lane and EULALIA had their moments. See, more lore. By book 19, you have an actual book titled EULALIA. Regular Joe hears that. What? What is that? EULALIA ! That is the Salamandastron war cry. Like, that is an iconic exclamation. So when you get a book titled that, you're just like, oh boy. Let's charge in the battle with our eyes glowing red. But yeah. See, we need to get 17 movies in so we can get to Rackety Tam, the one with the Scottish squirrel warrior who takes on a Wolverine.
Yeah, boy.
It's fantastic. That's one of my favorites. But yeah, Loam Hedge is really good. Tagarung on. So after book 14, the rest are all in chronological order. And stop swapping back and forth. So that's why, especially the later ones, start blending together because they don't memorably switch things up. Loam Hedge stands out because that ties in directly to the earliest lore, that Loam Hedge was the failed abbey that had disease that they had to escape, and then they're like, where are we going to go now? And then they build Redwall.
Interesting.
So just really smart decisions like that. But Lord Brocktree is technically the first chronologically detailing like the ancient Badger Lords, and like one of the main ones that are Badger focused and Hare focused, and that one's just a sprawling epic. Like again, Mossflower, the second book, and Lord Brocktree, the 13th. Are the only ones with main Wildcat villains. And it isn't until Lord Brocktree where you get like a male Wildcat in his prime taking on a Badger for a fight to the death. With an army so vast that when they witness them attacking Salamandastron, it just looks like an endless sea of vermin. See, this kind of imagery needs the best that money can buy. I haven't even mentioned how the sword of Martin the Warrior was forged from a fallen star. This is
what?
Yeah. Mossflower, days before Martin finds Salamandastron, a meteor had fallen. And so that's why it's the strongest sword out there, because they use this mysterious metal.
Yeah.
That the Badger Lord forged in his volcanic mountain fortress.
That just
sword
rocks.
Out of a fallen star. Come on, this is really great stuff. And like he's got the entire lineage of Badger Lords etched in the walls of his fortress. It's so fantastic. Okay, so before we wrap up, I would just like to tell you a tale, the woeful and tragic tale.
Here's a story that's rather grim.
Because if hips and butts were candies and nuts, you're gonna fall off and break your legs.
Oh no. But it is, and that is of the failed Mouse Guard adaptation. So a few years ago, they had announced that 20th Century Fox you may know where this is going, was adapting the Mouse Guard graphic novels. I hear that and I'm like, what's the Mouse Guard? Oh, it's about mice with swords. I'm like, why aren't you doing Redwall? And that's what every comment section is like, I don't know what this is. Is it like Redwall? I like Redwall. Can you do Redwall? Then reading the books later, like they are very like substantially different from Redwall.
I need to grab.
It's
I haven't read
fascinating.
those yet.
But Wes Ball, the director of the Maze Runner trilogy, was going to develop a $175 million motion capture, state-of-the-art CGI adaptation of these graphic novels. That's exactly what I wanted someone to do with Redwall. He had a vision of making these epic PG-13 groundbreaking fantasies. He gets to star Thomas Brody Sangster, who was Newt in the Maze Runner films, and also Ferb. Real fans call him Ferb. Andy Serkis and Idris Elba as the main villain. They were 2 weeks from the start of production. And then Disney bought Fox and decided, we don't want to try nothing new, so we're just gonna can it. You guys put in all this hard work. You're dead. You're done.
You know why Mickey talks the way he does?
Why? Tell me.
He's got no balls!
You're not wrong.
Okay.
That was the most disparaging news that I had ever heard, because every single thing about this project, to someone who hadn't really heard of the books, it sounded amazing. And then the day they canceled it, then, as kind of a screw you, Wes Ball released test footage, completely unfinished test footage of what they were working on. And even though it was unfinished, that looked amazing.
Yes, it did.
It looked so creative and so large scale, and that was just the basic stuff. Like he claimed we hadn't seen nothing yet. That was just to scratch the surface. And if something like that were to dare happen with Redwall, where you get a cast like that, a director with passion, and a crew that put in so much hard work and then just scrapped it completely.
What does that remind me of? I feel like I have the image of someone like... Is there some kind of cartoon where like someone's floating towards heaven or their dream, but then they just...
Scrat.
Scrat, yes. It's Scrat.
Which is ironic because just a week ago they killed Blue Sky too. Now that's a slightly lesser tragedy.
Yeah, like I'm not personally like Blue Sky's best movie is Ice Age, which is their first movie. Then they just kind of went downhill after that.
And then sputtered to life real quick with Peanuts.
Yeah, but then it does feel just like, okay, the mouse ain't gonna do nothing new. The mouse just wants to be the kingpin lord of all. That's just going to keep mass producing all the cookie cutter fluff.
And so that's why I am rooting for Netflix to take them down a peg.
Please.
Like, I'm petty. I want them to pay for their soulless actions. How else am I supposed to react to this? But the funny thing is, seeing that awesome test footage, it doesn't even remotely resemble the graphic novels.
Really?
Like, I've only read like the first couple, but like see the difference between Redwall and Mouse Guard are like so simple. Like an entire book of Mouse Guard would like fit into like the first 10 pages of Redwall. Like they're pretty straightforward, but have their charm certainly, but are a completely different beast entirely from Redwall. Then, like, even comparing, they're both Talking Mice with Swords projects that updated footage where the designs were completely new and the world building was insanely different, it still looked substantially
unique
from
yeah.
Redwall.
Because Redwall, like we said, we imagine it completely anthropomorphized, where the animals are more similar sizes, where like you treat animals more like fantasy races, but then what I can remember of that test footage, like that was exploring the ideas of, okay, no, these animals actually exist in a world where like mice are the main characters, but then most other animals are like the size of buildings compared to them.
Yeah.
Like they have like cities built on the backs of turtles.
That's really awesome.
Yeah.
Why shouldn't these two worlds be able to coexist if we can have a Harry Potter and a Lord of the Rings at the same time?
Yeah.
What's so bad about having two different talking mice worlds when we have two magical human worlds? Like, oh, mice are for kids. Shut up.
Is Mickey like my brain just went blank on what thing to use. My brain went blank on the thing, so I'll say Candletack instead. You say his name three times and he appears to take your soul. Beetlejuice.
You forgot Beetlejuice?
Can you blame me? But then, yeah, like all the fame had everyone going, Mickey, 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 and then Mickey pops up.
Don't grab me, please. Oh man, you do that voice, and then you literally grab my arm, and chills run down my spine. It's like Mickey's Agent Smith, and it's like, hello, Mr. Anderson. It's like, oh, then I slowly morph into. But then instead of Matrix, then hard cut to the beginning of Goofy movie, except it's Max turning into a giant mutant Mickey. Instead of the lightning striking in the background with the it's give it to us. Yeah. Okay. Nightmares for tonight, kids. All right, so final thoughts. Redwall's awesome.
Yeah.
Redwall's great. I do want to note, after rereading the books, they are noticeably written in a style, especially the earlier ones, for a younger audience. But that doesn't mean that the potential is lacking in any way. That just gives you a greater opportunity as filmmakers to
fill in your own vision.
Yeah, especially the earlier books could use a little snappier dialogue and a little quicker pace here and there with certain aspects. Like, I'm sure, like, I only read one of the Lord of the Rings books. Like, those are the same thing. Like, the core is excellent, but when making a modern movie, that you want to spice things up in a certain way and tick up the dialogue just a tad. And certain interactions.
Even though, the dialogue is so specific in the books, part of me would like to see an adaptation utilize more of the nobility of it. That the movies are more efficient, but it is either more simple or more modern than the books are.
That's interesting. But you would only assume that would be the case anyway.
I would like to see
the Tarantino version.
Not. What do you think? I would like to see
chills running down my spine.
Like a more not more faithful, because I consider the movies very faithful. I guess a slightly more inspired version, at least when it comes to some of the
just of the dialogue of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, or either the dialogue or some of the lore elements. I feel like, especially because the more I think about it, the more I'm not too confident in the Amazon Lord of the Rings show.
See, now that's the thing, because they've got to come up with all this stuff from scratch.
Yeah.
Where Redwall, you can do the exact same thing with jumping back to the beginning chronologically, but it's all there for you to right for the taking.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
But yeah, I'm losing confidence in the Amazon Lord of the Rings show. But honestly,
I'm just
potential
gonna
could
wait
rock.
and see.
The
yeah.
potential could be there. But on a different note, I find it strange how much I'm already hyping for a Fallout show.
I don't.
Like, yeah, it's so far off, but like I'm just like I want this to exist, please.
I mean, as every studio gets their own streaming service, I can only hope they're going to get more and more gutsy. I mean, look at Disney Plus's first flagship show, Mandalorian.
Yeah.
But like what it's lacking in storytelling, it more than makes it up for in like scale and production quality.
Definitely. Like that's
Like
the main reason to watch it. Just
it's got to be
the spectacle
a
of it.
signal of what's to come, that more people are gonna see what they did, or like a Game of Thrones production wise, and be like, why can't we do that?
And one thing I will give Disney, that, and Star Wars too, that like that's an example of something that can be big and bold and family friendly. That I was a little bit miffed when Game of Thrones was as big as it was, because even though I generally applaud people trying, I was also like, if that's the standard you're setting, now everybody wants to be Game of Thrones. Everybody and they think
that's what
that
happened.
necessarily includes the disgusting stuff too. Like, you don't have to do that. You don't. If you make a Lord of the Rings show, do. But I mean, we know they hired the intimacy coordinator, so we know that implies sex. So
That's
Why?
so weird. That's so weird.
Why?
And so, see, that's the thing. That's why Redwall is great for kids, as violent as it gets, because it gives them heroes and role models to root for.
yes,
And
the good heroes are always good.
If you're like a parent who's wants to give a hard pass to violence, then fine, so be it, whatever. But like if your kid can handle anything relatively intense, like take like Finding Nemo and the freaking Deepwater fish. Like that's a G-rated
Barracuda
movie.
Killing off all of the eggs.
600 children right at the beginning of the movie. To me, what's the big difference between that and you know, furry critters hacking each other to bits? Like, again, it's the context that matters. It's like not like, oh my gosh, that just came out of nowhere. No, it sets it up.
It always builds up to it, where there's different layers of trying to do the right thing, and then when you're forced into combat, then like, okay, if the bad guys are gonna fight, we're gonna fight too.
And like, we know plenty of families who let their children watch Lord of the Rings at a very young age. Yeah, Redwall, as dark as it gets, still isn't Lord of the Rings in level of like scary specters jumping out and spooking you and stuff like that. But I really hope that they can find it in them to be willing to go as far as they need to.
Yeah. Because, like, it, again, in that quote, it said for all ages. But, like, kids shows can be gritty if they need to be. Like, Gravity Falls. Gravity Falls has, the Haunted Mansion episode has, like, they're in a room with taxidermized animals that start bleeding. like, you have, like, a bear head mounted on a wall and just starts pouring blood out of it.
Get excessively disturbing lately. Like, so some of the stuff that The Amazing World of Gumball gets away with, like on a psychological level, like that is scarring. If you can do that,
like do that
Redwall
with actual
no problem.
storytelling.
Yeah. Like there's reason for it.
There's no, even though I'm trying to keep an air of skepticism just so I'm not too disappointed. But
again,
all the pieces are there though.
I
have no reason to doubt this at this point, but I'm still like just hoping.
To me, it all comes down to the trailer drop.
Yeah.
Once we see the first image or the first look, like that's when
it's the make it or break it point.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's when all the cards will be on the table.
That we'll see what they actually
What their
can
vision
do.
is.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's about all we
Oh no,
this.
I could go on for at least 2 more weeks. Again, this is the thing where, yeah, I'm fuzzy around the later books, but like the first half of the series, like I've got all the lore mapped out. I'm a hardcore Redwall nerd to the end, yo.
Uh-huh.
All right, well, here's hoping for the best then.
Yeah.
Thanks for sticking around, and I guess we'll see you in the next one.
Farewell.